doubt yourself. You know, self-doubt. Think maybe you're not good enough, smart enough, talented enough, skinny enough, colorful enough hair. I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna guess that everyone has felt that way at one time or another, and maybe multiple times. So why is that my motivation for today? It seems like an awfully strange thing to have as your motivation. Why? Because, yeah, this last couple days, I've been dealing with that. A little creeping up self-doubt that's really annoying me, frankly. You know, and I've heard people talk about it as your inner critic, which, all right, sounds fair enough, but I kind of hate that statement because, you know, you can't get away from them if it's an inner critic, but I can deal with self-doubt if I recognize it. And it's not easy. I mean, sometimes we can recognize it, but to really like get yourself out of a funk, you know, that point in your head where your head is telling you all those negative things is not easy. And we know it. And in this world today, which sounds funny because it's probably been in this world every day, maybe a little different today with, you know, this Instagram world where everybody wants to make their life and their business look perfect. It's hard to admit when you don't feel that way. And I think about myself. So I'm always like this completely optimistic, happy person with a smile on her face. But part of that is true, and part of that is a coping mechanism. So I always think that it's not, you know, sometimes I have to slap a smile on my face and kind of like, yeah, everything's great. But I'm not trying to be non-authentic or inauthentic when I do that. I'm not trying to make other people think something that's not true. I actually do that for me. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So when I look at my periods of self-doubt, you know, obviously I've had them my whole life. We all have. I don't think there's anybody who just, you know, feels fantastic about themselves all the time and believes everything that's going to go right in their lives. But I can look back and see different points in my life where my self-doubt really ran amok and created a lot of, you know, patterns that I still suffer from time to time. And the first one I was thinking about was even in college. So when I went to college, I was accepted into a 2-year honors program. It was like a 2-year integrated studies program at my university, and they only accepted 24 people a year. It was not easy to get in. You know, you had to have the right test scores. You had to have, you know, great letters of recommendation. You know, you had to have a really balanced background. So I had all those things. I wasn't a straight A student. I never was. And, you know, I don't know how I got in there, frankly. I mean, now I look back and go, well, gosh, I was kind of fun, and, you know, I had, you know, great people that loved me and knew that I worked hard. But all the time that I was in that program for 2 years, I never believed I was worthy of being in it. Isn't that weird? Like I was constantly going, why am I here? Look at all these people, they're brilliant. You know, they were valedictorians and they were 4.0+ students, and they could, you know, have philosophical debates, and they understood calculus. Not me. And so I spent those first 2 years of my college years not believing I belonged. In fact, in the last year, 6-7 months ago, I was messaging back and forth with one of my friends from college in that program. And we were talking about life and kids and, you know, work and everything. And one of the things he said to me really kind of surprised me, because I said something about, you know, gosh, I always felt intimidated by everybody else. You guys were all so smart. And he goes, you know, you used to say that all the time. And he goes, it bothered me. And he goes, I realized you at that time were the most confident, unconfident person I'd ever met. I went, wow, I don't know if that's a definition I want to use about myself, but you know, it was true. I outwardly would project that I was confident, but on the inside I was always like, I don't belong here. You know, the imposter syndrome, you know, that was something that was really the case for me. And I know I've had that at different parts of my life too. But where I am right now is something different. And it happens from time to time. So as this happened over the last couple of days, I wanted to reflect on what's going on? Like, why do I do these things? Why do I reach these points where I'm like, I don't feel confident at all. In fact, I'm wondering what I'm doing. So when I sit back and I look at what goes on during these times, I'm noticing a pattern. Strangely enough, we all typically have patterns that we fall into. So what I'm experiencing right now that I've had happen multiple times, it's right before something big that I've been working on is about to happen. Now, you'd think, well, gosh, Michael, something big is about to happen with something you've been working on. That must sound great. I mean, you're right there. But that's when I have the doubts the most. That's when the doubts actually can become overwhelming. That's when the doubts make me wonder what I'm doing and question myself. I had somebody ask me once, is that because it's a fear of success? Fear of failure? And I'm like, I have no idea. Because here, the reality is for me is that I don't really fear failure. I mean, we all do to some extent, but I've never been really worried about failing. I'm not overly fearful of success. I'd like to have a lot more success. I enjoy it. But there's something that happens right before something big. And as I really thought about this the last couple days, I realized that it's kind of like this gap. When I'm working really hard for something, I'm going and going and going. After I get it, you always have to deliver on it. So you're going and going and going. But there's this moment, might be a day, an hour, a month, depends on what that event is, what that project is. But there's these moments, this space and time where there's nothing. So there's nothing keeping me distracted by working hard to get there, and nothing keeping me distracted by knowing that I have to now fulfill that. It's this pause. And in that pause, for me, there's discomfort. And there's self-doubt. And there's fear, I guess, of some sort. So when I reflected on that, I thought, well, how am I going to continue to change how I react to things and how I interact with them? And it's important for me to change and grow, because I don't want the patterns that I've had previously in my life that are not supporting me to keep going. So I try to always figure out, well, what do we do? Where do we go from here? So I really broke it down into 5 steps. And as I tell you these 5 steps, the first 3 I'm really good at. It's the last 2 that I kind of suck at. And see, there's the self-talk again, right? But when I look at it this way, I understand that the first 3 I've been practicing a lot over the last couple decades. And so I'm much, much better at them. But the next 2, I'm not as good at. So that's actually the reason for this being my motivation today. It's for me to practice the next 2 and be able to show you what I'm doing. So when I broke this down, I looked at it this way. So, when I have these self-doubts that start talking to me and try and distract me from feeling good about myself or feeling positive, I first have to, number 1 step is acknowledge it. Acknowledge that I'm going through it. Acknowledge that I'm feeling it. To say out loud to myself, okay, you're going through something. Let's pay attention to it. And by acknowledging it to myself, you can't hide it away. A lot of times in my life when I'd be overwhelmed or stressed or having a lot of self-doubt, I tried to shut that away and I tried to put the smile on so that nobody else would see. But it really wasn't even so much about anybody else, it was about me. Because if I didn't know how to deal with it and I could push it aside, I thought, then it would either go away magically or I could just keep shoving more stuff. So like if you have a closet where you've got, or a drawer or a junk drawer where you just have stuff in, and when anybody shows up, you clean up your place by shoving it all in there and then shoving the door closed and hoping that it doesn't break down. I think that's how I operated a lot. So by first acknowledging to myself, I'm taking more control. So then the second part is to investigate. Okay, so what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? What are these things that I'm dealing with? What is making me feel this right at this minute? Because that investigation means now I do know it's there, but I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to actually look at it, and I'm going to look at it more strategically. And step 3 for me is reflecting and really taking that time, I guess, to think about it and think through it, not just investigate it and figure it out, but like internalize that and talk about it in my head. And those steps I've become really good at the last 10 years especially. I'm good at that self-reflection. I'm good at that thought process with it. But the next two steps are the ones that I haven't been as good at, and I'm working on them. And in fact, step 4 is the reason I'm even talking about it today, but I first did it with my husband, and that is share. To share with someone else that you trust, to share that you are struggling, or that you have doubts, or that you have questions or fears. And yesterday I finally just made the decision, I'm going to tell him what's going on. I need someone else to bear this burden with me. And so I pretty much probably talked for 10 minutes straight about what I was experiencing and feeling. And the great thing was is he just listened. I didn't tell him because I needed somebody to say, no, you're great, you're doing great. I didn't need someone to give me solutions or find different strategies. I just needed to share it with another human being and have that person recognize that I'm struggling with that. And over the years, we've gotten this great rapport where he then will say, is there anything I can do to help? Doesn't try and fix it, doesn't try and discourage me, I guess, from my own thoughts. He just wants to know. And that allows me to take some more control. So I'm like, no, right now I just need you to listen, but I'm going to talk more. And step 5 is probably the hardest step. Well, maybe not, maybe the other one's hardest, but it's to actually create a plan for myself to move out of the self-doubt, to be very conscious about taking control of what I can control of and letting go what I can't control, finding some peace with that, really making conscious steps towards dealing with the self-doubt head on. So here is my challenge to you today. I'd like to have you respond. You don't have to tell me or us what you're facing. You can if you want to, but I'd love to have you just put yes, or I am, or I have, or I do in the comments, just to have a sense of community where we realize that we're not all alone, and there are a lot of people, in fact, probably every single person on the planet that deals with self-doubt. The question is, can we acknowledge it, investigate it, reflect on it, share it, and use all those pieces to help us come up with a plan to move us forward? Because the more that we help understand and deal with that self-doubt, that inner critic, the better off we're all going to be to shock our potential.